In this video, you will learn something about integrating under a curve, especially if you're not from a mathematical background, and why something so simple can completely change the way you look at the world. In particular, we'll be talking about the Great Chinese Famine, the death rate in China, the crude death rate in China since 1960 to now, and also the same in India, and see, let's just see. So, um, if you have not heard about the Great Chinese Famine, it was a horrible tragedy that happened in China in 19 like around 1960, and so many people died. And it's terrible. And if you are a person who has just learned to speak English, sooner or later some liberal will come to you and make you aware of this fact, and they will claim that Mao killed millions of his own people and so on, and you feel terrified of something like this happening. And so this is to check the data of all of this tragedy. Now here I have I'm using World Bank data, and I have plotted the they have plotted the death rate in China versus India. So the death rate of China in 1960 was 25 and India was 20. So the deaths were in India in 1960 were lower and China's was higher, and then therefore you might be quick to conclude that, oh well, India is doing better. And then you would of course look at the data over time. So we'll look at the data until now, and you can see that the death rate in China immediately jumped down to around 7 or 8 in after 10 years. So that's a massive reduction in death rate. And in India it came down very slowly, very slowly, and now it's supposed to be equal. Now again it's higher in India than in China, but it was both 7 around 2018 or so. And the question is, this rate of slowly coming down, like China quickly reduced the death rate per 1,000 people, crude death rate, and India reduced it very slowly. Now the question is, how many people did that cost us, this slow reduction in death rate? And we'll go back to that. And I downloaded this data here, and the relevant part of the data is in this sheet, and I know the numbers are too small. The numbers don't, I will read out the numbers. You can get the same data from the same website that I have shown. So you have 1960 to 2022, and then you have the death rate in China, death rate in India, population of China, population of India, total deaths in China and total deaths in India per year. And now here this number 86 million, that's the number of people who died in China from 1960 to 1970, which was considered a bad decade for China. And 86 million people died total. I'm not saying excess deaths, like total deaths. Um, and what's the number for India? It's 103 million people. And I'm saying that like this because we haven't considered the fact that the death rate came down so quickly that in a decade more people in India died than in China. It's the number is like what, 17 more million more people died in India in that decade. That's not the worst part. The worst part is that India's population was almost 200 million lower than China in that time. So you have 10% of people dying in China uh, in the decade 1960 to 1970, and 18.5% of people dying in India from 1960 to 1970. Same time period, no, there was a Bihar drought in, but that was not a major famine like the Great Chinese Famine. So where are the accusations that Nehru killed 100 million of his own people? Now these are not excess deaths, so you can't count all deaths as excess. I'll tell you the real death toll of capitalism in India. So you have almost twice as much of fraction of people dying in the same decade, and yet we are told that the revolution worsened things for China. Who would think that? You look at China today, and I try to look for slums in China because I wanted to take a picture of slums, and this is what I have to see. And these are like so pixelated images. Who knows when they were taken? Look, this is slums. Slums in China have been eradicated, and India has this and loads. 1 million people live in Dharavi. This is a very small area in Mumbai. 1 million people. That's more than the population of the Dakotas and Wyoming in the US. Can you imagine 10 lakh people living in such condition in just a single city? And I do not believe hence that India's and China's death rates are similar at all. India is 2.5 million people die in India of hunger every year, and we don't even have a famine. Where is the famine? Where is the lack of food? Where is the scarcity? All our stores are filled with food, so filled, in fact, that items expire on the shelf and they have to be thrown out. They go to waste because it's simply less profitable to set up an initiative where you give out those items. And so the production is not to feed the people, the production is for private companies to make profit, and that is how India has been operating, the economic anarchy, basically, what how Einstein called it in his essay Why Socialism. You should read it. Okay, I'll just end this video here because if it's too long then people really don't start watching it. The point of the video, I mean, I didn't even do any mathematical integration. I mean, it's not a mathematical function, it's data. So all I did was, this is the uh, death rate, and I multiplied that with population. So, and then I added it up, which is like integrating. You add these vertical strips together, and when you integrate under the curve, you realize that all this area is the people who died. Oh yeah, and I forgot to show you, like, this is how many people have died in China since the 1960, and this is how many people have died in India in 1960, and the difference is 88 million. So that's how many people capitalism has killed in India, 88 million. And that's a very good number, and the reason is that China and India started at very similar standpoints, and now the populations are equal. So when, if you want to compare, if you want to calculate the number of people that capitalism has killed excessively in India, and that is 88 million, and that's a real number, unlike the 100 million number that you hear. That's completely made up.